listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is March 21st, 2023. That's right, it is Patch Day, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine, patchy Tuesday?
Spencer, hello. I am not doing very well. I've been pretty ill. I was laid up. I was down for the count yesterday, man.
Oh, no.
But I'm a little bit more back to normal today. So that's good. I'm up and around. I wouldn't have been able to record the show yesterday. So, I'm doing better. But as we are recording, it's about 1 p.m. Eastern on the 21st. We do not have servers yet. The patch has been deployed to our launchers, but servers are not up, so we have not had a chance to hop into anything yet. But I'm pretty excited. This patch has a lot of seemingly cool stuff in it. I think it's going to provide some of that motivation to check other stuff out in the game that I've been lacking the last maybe month or two here. So I'm excited. I think the patch is going to be a great way to smooth out the wait for 10.1 and Season 2.
Yeah, I am pumped for seeing some of the newer content that's coming in. I'm still playing catch up on some of the older stuff, so I still have a little bit of ways to go before the newer stuff makes as much sense to me. So I'm going to hold off probably a little bit till later in this week before I check out any of it, just to give myself time to finish some of the story exploring that I'm doing. Since I basically went from finishing story to immediately into trying to actually gear a character. I need to actually do a little bit more story stuff beyond that to be able to catch up with where everything's at. So I'll be doing that. But yeah, it's an exciting day for new content. There's a lot of changes that come in that are pretty exciting about this. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is the first time we've ever seen them do this kind of .7 type of patch. This this late season update that actually adds content, adds big changes, and kind of refreshes everything. At the end of the first season, the first tier of the expansion, it's a new concept, and we're going to see some catch up gear and stuff like that come in. The kind of item tokens that usually don't get into a big numbered patch or even the final patch of an expansion. So that's pretty awesome. I mean, we're probably still a good 2 months, 3 months, somewhere in that neighborhood away from 10.1 and Season 2. So I think this is going to give people a chance to really get what they felt like they wanted out of Season 1 and maybe, get another character rounded out and ready to play Season 2 or whatever. It's awesome. I hope it delivers on kind of the promise that it seems to have and that players like it. It is a lot of stuff changing at once, though. We've already seen, this is already the second patch we've seen in Dragonflight. We've seen a ton of changes via patches and hotfixes. We got another massive patch just on the way. And, I feel like WoW is a game that has it's had these lulls of being stagnant for long periods of time. And now it's moving totally in the other direction. And it can be kind of hard to wrap your brain around all of this stuff at once in terms of, what is happening now? What is new in the game now? What is down the road that I need to know about? We've never seen the live game rollout updates like this. So I think it's definitely a worthy experiment. I'm glad to see more stuff coming in more quickly, but that is a concern that I have. Even I myself, who I pay a lot of attention to this stuff, I sort of have this. The last few weeks have had this weird problem of not being able to distinguish between what's in the live game, what's in 10.0.7, and what's in 10.1. Mm-hmm. At least we're removing one version off the table as 10.0.5 is going away this week. So that should help my brain a little bit.
Yeah, it's certainly less WoW to track, which is nice, but there's a lot that is happening news-wise this week. And so I do want to dive into that. But before we do, Jason, do you have anything in particular you're wanting to highlight from last week?
Yeah, a couple things. I got to say the nerfs to Heroic Raszageth are great. And I think, we're seeing people get kills. And I think that the Phase 2 Absorb Shield thing just feels really good. It gives you more uptime in Phase 2, and it's less big cooldowns or abilities you have to commit into the shield. So that's awesome. I'm starting to have an issue with Mythic Taros, and I almost feel like I got to pull the plug. I got to figure out what my schedule is going to be like, because we're getting pulls in, but I don't have a viable group. I'm not getting like the healer combo that I need. I'm not getting my top DPS showing up for Prog Nights. And so you end up in a situation where it's like, well, we could pull this thing all night long, but we're never going to get close to killing it. And is that worthwhile? And I don't know. 2 weeks ago, the fight felt doable, but just because of personnel stuff and real life stuff, we're in kind of a weird spot with it right now. So that's kind of a bummer. It's definitely a killable boss if our our A team was available for 15, 20 pulls a week, but
Yeah.
we're just not there right now, which is unfortunate. On the bright side, I actually got 2 dungeon teleports done last week, Ruby Life Pools and Algathar Academy. So that brings my total for the season up to 6 of 8. I just got to get Halls of Valor and Temple of the Jade Serpent, and that'll be all 8 for the season. So I think that's pretty doable. I've had a couple heartbreakers on Halls and Temple already, and as we continue to kind of gear up, fill in some gaps or whatever, and people get more used to how it goes, we get some more practice. I mean, I'm pretty sure we'll get them. I picked up a couple tricks for both of those dungeons in the last few weeks, either in terms of like micro strategy around certain pulls or bosses, and also just like talent builds. Like there are particular clutch talents for Temple of Jade Serpent that I don't normally run. So that's a cool element of the system, but it's like stuff like that can slip through the cracks. And it's like, oh, well, if you take spell block, then, this boss or these trash packs are actually way easier. So, there's been a learning curve there, but it's pretty nice. It's cool getting, it's weird that I got all of the Dragonflight dungeons done first. I would not have expected that at the outset of the season, because they felt so much harder, but it's just kind of the way it lined up. And I do think like Halls and Jade Serpent they're both pretty difficult dungeons. Like as you scale up, especially Jade Serpent has some really punishing boss and trash mechanics. So, it's just kind of the way it worked out, but I think we'll get there. We should have enough time, and as long as the keys line up and we keep doing 20s and we starting the weeks with everybody having 20s to get going, and that'll feel nice. I mean, it was a bad couple weeks there where I wasn't getting any new teleports unlocked, so getting 2 in 1 week felt really great last week.
Nice. Yeah, no, congratulations on that. It's a nice thing to start crossing off the list. All right, folks, let's dive into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft, because it's a huge show. All right, so we only have so much information since servers are still down with the large patch that's kicking in. However, we do know it's Dragonflight Dungeon event, which means the Sign of the Warrior buff is up, where the final boss of each Dragonflight dungeon awards an extra item when defeated. This, of course, does not count towards Mythic Plus difficulty. However, you do get the quest to complete 4 dungeons on Mythic difficulty or above, which rewards a cache of Heroic Vault treasures. So you do get that heroic piece of loot if you just run even 4 Mythic Zeros for the week, or if you're just doing your 4 M plus for the week, you can get your Vault treasures that way as well. So great week to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and it can be, there's so much good stuff in the Vault table. It can be those like rare drop items like the rings and what have you. And yeah, you could do pretty like low difficulty Mythic dungeons in order to get this done. So definitely worth doing. It's a great event week for low gear characters, because you can do some lower difficulty Keystone dungeons or even Mythic Zeros, and maybe get some loot and then get a really nice heroic piece to gear up a little bit with. So yeah, I wish that the extra piece of loot in the end of dungeon chest applied in Keystone dungeons, but it doesn't, so we just have to deal with it. I guess for me, like, there's really no gear I'm chasing at this point. It's just like, I would like 3 item levels or 6 item levels here or there. So yeah, it doesn't matter that much. It's just a nice bonus on top of something that I'd already be doing anyway, which is at least 4 Keystone dungeons. Yeah.
Well, we don't have the dungeon quests and PvP quests and whatnot for the week, because obviously servers are still down. But the PvP Brawl is going to be Comp Stomp, which means it's a Arathi Basin against AI bots, basically your advanced AI that they threw into the game. Is going to be controlling the opposite team, and you go in and just stomp the floor with them, and it feels really good. So if you're someone who wants to have a really fun time inside Battlegrounds this week, You can queue up for some Comp Stomp and get something different quest done, giving you some Marks of Honor, Conquest and Honor, as well as just a lot of wins. If you're trying to get a bunch of wins for your Battlegrounds, it's a great way to do that real fast.
Yeah, this Brawl is so cool. It's super fun. You know, just beating up on bots inside of AB, man. I don't know. I dig it anyway. I almost sort of wish this was an option that was always on the table if you just felt like doing it. But I guess I kind of get why it isn't. But yeah, I mean, this should be an easy way to get your weekly something different done. Mm-hmm. And yeah, if you need various achievements or whatever, the AI usually doesn't put up too much of a fight, so you can just go in there and feel like a god of AB.
Yeah. The world boss is Bazuil, the Dreaded Flame, the Fire Proto-Dragon in Azure Span. You can get yourself some 395 loot as far as plate wrists, mail feet, leather waist, cloth chest, and a heavy haste ring with a crit, with critical strike on it. The Mythic Plus affixes for the week are Fortified, Spiteful, and Grievous, meaning non-boss enemies have more health and inflict increased damage. Fiends rise from the corpses of non-boss enemies and pursue random players, and injured players suffer increasing damage over time until healed. So this is like a... Fortified Spiteful is always kind of ugly, because trash is going to take longer to kill, and then when you kill trash, more trash comes back from the dead, which then also takes longer to kill. So it's not great. Spitefuls in general, for dealing with them, it's always nice to root them, snare them, stun them, just keep them locked down, because their health does decay over time, which means that if you can just keep them locked down long enough, they will just fade away on their own. However, they do lock you into combat. So anyone who wants to stealth, for example, can't do that. Anyone who wants to do a skip or interact with something that requires them to be out of combat can't do that. So you do often end up turning and just killing the Spitefuls, which just means you have essentially almost twice as much trash throughout the entire dungeon, because every time you kill something, it comes back as a Spiteful. So it's just getting used to doing trash upon trash upon trash. Grievous, fortunately, doesn't really sync up with Spiteful at all in any sort of shape or form, because if a Spiteful ad is hitting you, then you are like most likely doing something very wrong. If it hits you twice, you're probably dead. So Grievous isn't going to be the thing that kills you if a Spiteful ad's hitting you. However, Grievous and Fortified is ugly, because any mob that does some sort of AoE damage will start dropping players below that 90% health threshold, in which case Grievous starts to stack, and you'll see a lot more players having to deal with Grievous. So it's kind of an ugly healer week. If you're a healer for dungeons this week, it's just being like, oh, Fortified Grievous, okay, I'm in for it. Everyone's going to be constantly dealing with Grievous stacks, and I have to keep healing people and topping them up. And as an individual player who's not necessarily a healer, or even a nice tip for healers, is direct healing does remove Grievous stacks. So if you have a way of direct healing yourself, you can actually reduce the stacks back down and get your health back up. Obviously, as soon as players get over 90%, all the stacks are removed. But if you're like up to 4 stacks and the whole group took an AoE hit, maybe throw 1 or 2 globals into healing yourself so that you actually reduce that down to 2 stacks and help your healer catch up with everybody else. So yeah, it'd be a great thing to do for that. So a bit of a rough week for healers. Overall, kind of a sloggy week for trash. Not the most fun week that's out there.
Yeah, Spiteful's just, it feels terrible. It's just not fun to deal with. I mean, like, obviously the affixes are supposed to make the dungeon harder. That's the purpose that they serve. They're not supposed to make it easier, but Spiteful just isn't really fun. And yeah, on a Fort Spiteful week, it extends the time you're going to spend fighting trash so much. Now, the Spiteful ghosts do eventually despawn, so you can position around them, and you can root them and stuff, and save yourself some time that way. So, like, good positioning can cut down on that a bit. But overall, like, it doesn't feel good. And Grievous is effective on boss battles as well, and there's plenty of boss abilities that target a random player or do AoE. So you don't have any part of the dungeon like off as a team this week, which that can be let's just be kind of obnoxious. Overall, I think this week is like okay-ish. It is going to be somewhat dungeon dependent as well, because Spiteful can be really bad or not as bad depending on which dungeon you're doing. If you're in Jade Serpent, Spiteful's a much bigger problem than if you're in Noku Defensive, right? So it just that's one thing, I guess, in this week's favor is certain dungeons will be a bit easier with this combo than other dungeons will be.
Right.
And Yeah, I mean, it is nice. They changed Grievous a while back that direct heals remove a stack immediately. I remember in the waning days of BFA when we were in like full corruption gear and I had just an astronomical health pool. I would do keystones and I would never be able to get bailed out of Grievous in combat.
Right.
I just end up in 5-stack Grievous until we could end combat and I could like sit down and eat while being spam healed.
What was the food that we always told people to bring and eat? I can't remember what it was.
There was well, that was in Legion. There was Fighter Chow, which was amazing for getting your health regen out of combat. They had like a replacement Fighter Chow in BFA, but it wasn't as good. But still, like that was where we ended up. So in Shadowlands, they changed it so that direct heals would just remove a stack.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of tank specs now have. I think pretty much everybody has a desirable self-heal talent. Even Warrior can, Warriors just kind of take impending victory as mostly as a default thing for most builds. So you can easily get that heal off every 20 seconds if you get into Deep Grievous. So there's some counterplay around it, but it is going to tax your healer a bit. Your healer's going to have to be aware, and I don't know. It's a real mixed bag this week. Some bosses are going to feel super easy. Bosses that don't do like a lot of raid damage or don't target random players with some kind of a nuke, and some bosses are going to be a nightmare with Grievous. And yeah, I mean, Trash is going to be slow. Try to use the layout of the dungeon to your advantage and avoid killing the stuff if you can.
Yeah. All right, Trial Style is up and live and running at the moment, so if you're someone who wants to get out there and get yourself some Trial Style tokens from winning, you can, and get yourself some of the new transmog. We talked about it a bit last week, but I'll just highlight again quickly. It's a 6-person scenario where you head in. You can queue up with up to 5 people in your own group if you want, and actually queue into it. And then basically you're putting on a fashion show. It's whoever can actually meet the theme. There's a randomly assigned theme to the fashion show, and you create a transmog, and you get put up on the stage, and it round robins through each individual. And each of those individuals are voted on. And whoever ends up with the most winning votes obviously gets first, second, third place, and you get different prizes based on them. And yeah, you can use the tokens that you win to pick up some more transmog. So definitely a fun event to take part in. Super easy to do. Just got to put a little effort into making sure you look good. That's all.
Yeah, this is one of the most unique and just like sheer fun things that they put into WoW in many years. And it does only come around twice a year. It's March and September, so this is your last shot for a few months. I got to try to get in here before the end of the week because they did add some new stuff. There's like a new hat you get just for participating in this round. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, it's just, whatever. The stakes here are low. It's all just MOG stuff, right? It's not like, oh, well, your character is not going to be competitive if you don't get your Trial of Style done for this, this time period. But it's just fun. And it's okay to have stuff in the game. It's just fun. And, does stuff like awards interesting or just, even kind of funny cosmetics. But yeah, it's really awesome. If you've never done it before, you need to do it while you still can, because it's a good time, especially if you can, full queue, like get a full 6-player group together and do it together and be in voice chat. It really, like, describing it doesn't really do it justice because it's so wacky and that's fun. And yeah, they finally added a bunch of new rewards. It had been a while, and then we got like the boots and stuff in Shadowlands, I think it was, and now we got a bunch of more stuff. So very cool. I hopefully I can squeeze it into my schedule before it goes away this time.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've always enjoyed, and I'm glad that they keep bringing it back. And I wish it happened more often. Is really all it comes down to. Vault of the Incarnates is officially closed for Hall of Fame. Alliance finally finished out their Hall of Fame, and so. Now, congrats to everyone who actually got their spots in the Hall of Fame and got the titles associated with them, and that's that. There's no longer a hey, now we have cross realm mythic. It's all been open for a while, so now it's just hey, congrats to those who got it, and moving on from that. I think this is a month after the Horde 1 closed, maybe a little long, maybe 5 weeks after the Horde 1 closed. So it's still speaking to the inequity as far as when it comes to the amount of players who are willing to do mythic rating on Alliance side, which. I hope starts to soften a little bit with a lot of the cross-faction guild stuff they're talking about coming up, but we will have to see whether it's enough to convince people to actually come back over. I don't think it will be. I think at this point the scales are so out of whack in one direction that
Yeah.
You just won't see it happen unless they actually go in and say, hey, you know what? Here's some overpowered Alliance racials. And that'll convince
Right.
people to actually go, okay, well, we're going to switch everyone over to Alliance to take advantage of the overpowered Alliance racials. And then, you know, we'll see an inequity the other way for a period of time that they can start to work to try and level out that way. But who knows? We'll see what happens with it. But yeah,
Yeah,
congrats to those
I think
teams.
at this point, like it's just everything is like too little, too late as far as trying to establish some kind of parity there. If cross faction guilds go live in 10.1, this might be the last Hall of Fame that we see like this anyway. I guess we don't have any details on what the plan for Hall of Fame is going forward, but you know, we know that the way cross faction guilds are going to work is the guild is technically considered an alliance or a horde guild, depending on the faction of the guild leader. So, you know, I don't know. Is that going to change anything at all if they still do alliance and horde like Hall of Fames, right? Like, I don't know.
You have one alt that's an Alliance side alt, and all of the raiders
Right.
are horde players. And that Alliance side alt
Right.
is the guild leader. And so you have an Alliance team that's comprised of entirely horde players getting Hall of Fames. Would be hilarious.
Yeah, and you know, and then maybe that's the way people metagame it to get
Yeah.
you know, make sure they get in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I think it would make more sense to probably just do like top 200,
Right.
and you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, obviously, this was Hall of Fame was a thing that I think they put in hopes that it would sort of balance the scales a little bit in terms of representation among factions at high mythic rating, and it obviously didn't. It was too little too late. You know, they ignored the issue for so long.
So long. Yeah.
There just ended up being no real way to fix it that was consistent with the way that they were, you know, currently developing the game. So kind of is what it is. It was a cool idea. I like having the Hall of Fame thing, but in a world where people can be in guilds together regardless of which faction they're playing, the whole thing needs to be rethought a bit anyway. I think that would be the thing to do. It would just be top 200 instead of 100 horde, 100 alliance. Just do top 200, and you know, people can play whatever they want with whoever they want and make it happen.
Yeah, there's perspective associated with that, right? Because you end up in a situation where the top 200 teams right now are actually horde teams. There's just a few alliance kind of split, like salted in there a little bit here and there, but in general, it's, you know, I think 250 teams or something on horde side kill it before the Alliance Hall of Fame fills. And you're like, okay, like,
Yeah, right.
But when you actually look at top 200, it's probably something like, you know, 220 horde teams and 180 horde teams and 20 alliance is what you're sort of looking at, right? So it's, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what that actually looks like once Hall of Fame kicks around. But anyways, there's a post out here about slip onto the turbulent timeways beginning on March 28th. So the Bronze Dragonflight has discovered growing disturbances in the timeways, with several rapidly intersecting our own. Beginning on the week of March 28th, players can time walk through a previous expansion each week for 6 consecutive weeks. The grand tour through World of Warcraft's past will start with Cataclysm and end on Wrath of the Lich King. Also, for a limited time, the time walking quest in Valdrakken from Khazra will offer an increased reward, a heroic level cache for the time walking stuff, which is 402 to 411 eye level. The reward upgrade is only available for the special time walking event. After Turbulent Time Walking has run its course, it will return to the 389 cache of Vault loot. So yeah, the schedule is, we got Cataclysm happening on the 28th, and then on April 4th, we're seeing Mists of Pandaria, and then Warlords of Draenor on the 11th, Legion on the 18th. April 25th is Burning Crusade, and then May 2nd is Wrath of the Lich King. So just working their way back through expansions each of these weeks. And yeah, the increased rewards for doing all the dungeons quests is going to be really neat to see. So pretty crazy, pretty weird, out there kind of idea, but I think fun. I think a lot of people will enjoy this, and it'll be a neat little tour through things. I'm curious as to what like inspired this. That's the curious thing for me. It doesn't like line up with an anniversary of some kind.
No, I think it's just a good way to give people a chance to catch up, you know, on some characters before season 2 starts. You know, this ending May 2nd may mean that shortly thereafter, ending the week of May 2nd, it may mean that shortly thereafter we're going to see 10.1 and a season roll and what have you. So I think it's a super cool concept. Having time walking available every week is pretty awesome for the stretch of time. And we've seen them do stuff like that before too, where they have time walking up, you know, more than it would normally be. but doing the heroic cache for the event reward is amazing. Like I will definitely make a point of doing this on my monk for each of these weeks. And also time walking is a pretty good source of XP at the moment. So might be a good time for me to start actually getting some of the alts going and getting through this stuff, because time walking has felt really good so far in this expansion. The tuning feels very favorable. The rewards feel pretty good. I haven't done any leveling in it, but I've heard from people who say that it's a great way to level above 60. So this was kind of a surprise. Like, I think this post came out yesterday, and I was just like, where? This is like out of nowhere. This is very strange, but I love it. I think it's a great way to, again, we're in the the waning part of this season, and it's a great way to inject some life into it. If you want to take a low gear character, or maybe level up a new character and take them through this very accessible content and get some powerful rewards, like that's amazing. It condenses like months worth of time walking into a 6-week span.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that way. So certainly a great way to gear up. And if you're right, if this is what leads up in 10.1, it's a nice catch-up mechanic for people trying to get that gear, because it's just one of those free heroic pieces every week leading into it. And then I'd imagine when everything scales up for the next season, obviously heroic becomes a much more accessible, that item level becomes much more accessible the week after. So it gives some like excitement every single week leading into it as far as gear goes, before that gear starts to get a little bit more, I guess, rusty and not as shiny as the newer stuff. All right, 10.7 content update notes. So there's like a ton of notes on our show today. We actually have 33 pages of notes that we are going to not work our way entirely through. We're going to make sure that we hit all of the important points for everybody here, but we'll probably leave some of the 10.1 stuff until next week, when we're sort of a little bit lighter on the show load to fill that in. But 10.0.7 came out today. It is now going to be live once servers come up. And of course, we're returning to the Forbidden Reach. This is obviously where you go for the learn more about the story with the Drakthir Evokers and what's going on with them. It's going to be a fun new space for everyone to sort of explore and discover. There's lots of treasures and, expedition sort of fun encounters with new bosses and objectives, and more loot. That's the important thing. More loot for everybody. We're also getting the Monk class expanded into new races. So there's the Lightforged Draenei, Worgen, and Goblin, which can now all become monks. So if you're someone who's been waiting to swap over your Worgen to a monk because they now have that new Worgen thing coming in at some point, I think it's 10.1, where you essentially transform out of your Worgen form when you are not in combat and transform into it when you're going into combat. I think that'd be pretty cool to have for a monk-style Worgen. Would be kind of neat. They have the Winterpelt Furbolg faction, which is going to be kicking off. So if you're someone who wants to learn to speak the Winterpelt Furbolg language, you will need to be putting in effort with their faction, and you will learn their language over time. And you can sort of explore more of their adventures and more of their culture, which I think is pretty cool. There's Bane Search. Obviously, Mela High Mountain is worried about Bane Bloodhoof out in the Onaran Plains, so is going off searching for a friend, so you get to try and track down what's going on with Bane. And of course, the faction envoys are now going to be present, where you can represent a Dragon Isles major faction every day by visiting the envoys in the Forbidden Reach and earn 10% reputation increase towards those factions for the day, and you can then actually work your way along through those factions. The envoys also have rewards that are like dragon riding customizations, and there's a battle pet, and there's a new mount, the Noble Brufalon, that you can actually get and ride around. So lots of fun stuff happening with the faction envoys. I know Jason's going to be knocking out the Orc and Human Heritage armors and making sure they are all done, because everyone wants those OG back in the day armors for Orcs and Humans. So if you're looking to pick those up, you can go and see Matthias Shaw in Stormwind or Etrigig in Orgrimmar, and you can begin those quests. Obviously, if you level the human all the way up, you should be able to just go and, get the actual quest to start this up right away. Otherwise, it's the 0 to 50, I think, for these particular classes. You have to level up from 1 to 50 with like not a boost, and then you can actually pick up the Heritage Armor quests and be able to participate in those.
Yeah, they don't specify about the boost. That was like a thing with the allied races because they were like brand new. And when they added heritage armors back for the legacy races, they didn't have that requirement. And they don't specify here, so that you may be able to do this with a character that had been boosted or has been boosted. I know I was able to do it with the goblin set. I had a goblin that I boosted that I was able to do it with. You do need exalted rep with Orgrimmar or Stormwind in order to start the quest chain. So that may be a problem for me with my orc. I have an orc tune, and I kind of doubt that it's exalted with Orgrimmar. So I might have to buy a tabard and go do Auchindoun dungeons or something for a bit. Maybe next time Darkmoon Faire rolls around, get some extra rep. Because that's going to take a minute for me, I think. But the heritage armors are awesome, and they've done a great job of putting really satisfying and interesting quest content around unlocking the heritage stuff as well. So I expect that will be the same with this. So I am definitely looking forward to doing this, but I may have to grind up a little bit of rep first.
I mean, if Shaw's involved in it for Alliance side, I'm certainly intrigued because he's a fun character to be able to play around with.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the heritage armors look great. I think both of these come with a couple different pieces, so you can kind of mix and match and do some different looks around the same basic concept. We saw some stuff with that in previous rounds of heritage as well, like Mag'har orcs, for example. Right. But I think from what they've shown in videos and screenshots of this, there's even more options than that set had for these. So that's really cool. Definitely something to, if you're like, man, I want to play WoW, but none of the stuff is really speaking to me, but I don't know what to do with myself. I can't recommend the Heritage Armor stuff more highly based on its track record. Like the questing and stuff around these has just been so good.
Right. Recruit a Friend also is receiving the update this week, so you get the new Recruit a Friend program kicking in with all the new rewards and whatnot that exist. We highlighted a lot of those earlier, but you can actually go to a post, which I'll include in the show notes, that actually explains all of the thresholds of how much time the person has to purchase as their friend in order for you to get extra rewards. And I think you can have up to, I think we said it was up to 6 different people who can actually be your friend on the list. And it's a pretty good deal when it comes to the Recruit a Friend, if you have a friend who's going to consistently play or pay every month for you to actually be able to do that. So check out the new Recruit a Friend program if you're interested in that. I still think, and I'll emphasize it here, this is a program that needs to cut down how long someone has been not playing to qualify for. It is ridiculous. Even at 6 months, it would be ridiculous. It should be 3. It should be 3. If your friend hasn't played in 3 months, recruit him. Man.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, we talked about it before. I think 2 years is just way too long for an account to be inactive, for it to be eligible for Recruit a Friend. Anything to reduce it down from 2 years. I guess if it was 18 months, it also wouldn't be very good. It needs to be a year or less. And maybe I think somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 months would be even better. They did post some clarification, as we're going live, on the current reward track versus the incoming reward track. And basically what they say is if you were on the current track, you'll continue earning the Indiana Jones theme track. Basically, you'll continue earning those as long as your recruits stay current. If they lapse, then you will move to the new reward track, the Goblin theme track. So just something to keep in mind. In my case, I am at 11 of 12 on the Indiana Jones track. My friend who used my Recruit a Friend link, he's been playing consistently. He's been showing up to raid and stuff. So I think I'll probably finish that. But then I assume that doesn't just roll over into the new track. I assume that I would need another recruit for the new track. That hasn't been totally specified, at least to the point that I can understand it. So.
Well, it's a good question for him, for sure.
I would say if you have anybody in mind, that you think that might want to use this, once you get into the game after this patch, get your link generated and send it out to them as soon as you can. Let them know what's up, because I don't know if you have any kind of grace period or whatever. I think you have to use the Recruit a Friend link to actually reactivate the account, or else you don't get credit for it. So if you think you might have friends or somebody that that might want to use your Recruit a Friend link, I would say get one generated as soon as you can after you can get back into the game.
Yeah. All right, as far as achievements go, the flying in Battle for Azeroth zones no longer requires Battle for Azeroth Pathfinder. In other words, hey, if you're a newer player, you just got into the game, you don't actually have to go and do Pathfinder to be able to fly in BFA. You can just do it. Yay, good job. Glad that's there. Characters, new hair colors are available for orcs and humans. Hey, if you're someone who really wanted a little bit more customization for your orc or your human, be sure you're checking out the new hair colors. Right now, Transmog is free, although Barbershop was already free, I believe, with how they changed it. So, as much as changed around your clothes, you could also just go and change around your hair.
If you change up your hair color, you got to change your outfit potentially. So, yeah, exactly. Do it before Friday. But, yeah, I mean, it's weird because to me, it's like I don't know why a lot of these weren't in there before. I didn't even really think about it, but I don't play a human or an orc very much anyway, so it wasn't really an issue. But it's cool that they're able to just throw stuff like this into a relatively minor patch like this. So, all part of sort of that big revamp, whatever you want to call it, that happened in 9.0 when Shadowlands was coming out with the character customization stuff, just adding a lot more vectors to put stuff that people can customize on, and now they can do stuff like, okay, well, here's just a bunch of new hair colors for these different races and go have fun. That's awesome. And that's the kind of stuff that in years past, we never would have seen.
Yeah. All right. Class stuff. This is big. So Death Knights as Frost and Holy. If you play Frost and Holy Death Knight, go and check out the notes. They've done a pretty big rework on how your class works. So you'll want to actually check those out. Demon Hunter, similar thing. Did some fairly large changes. Druids, I would say if you're playing Feral, they didn't actually change too much about what was going on. Berserk, they sort of tweaked a bit. Guardian, they sort of tweaked a bit. But across the board, what their goal was, particularly with Restoration, was to make a lot of the underutilized talents more available to be used more often. So I would certainly say as a druid, it's worth visiting some of the usual areas like Wowhead / the Dreamwalking, Dreamgrove Discord channel, those sorts of places to go and see what druids are saying about the particular classes, because there's enough tweaks here that I think you could see some talent changes happening for some players, so might be worth investigating. Evokers, you're got some work as well in there, so be sure you're checking that out. Hunters, primarily just Beast Mastery buffs, as well as Marksman, got a few talent tree reworks in there as well. Monks, Mistweaver, and Windwalker. Guys
keep in mind about Hunters. Sorry.
Yeah.
Today is the day
the bow.
For Neltharax.
Yeah.
They're fixing the bug that was making pet attack speed be increased by Neltharax as well. So, a little contentious. It kind of sucks the way that all turned out, honestly, because it was such a cool item, but it was so powerful that it just crowded everything else out in the space, and likely would have just been better than anything else that didn't replicate the effect going forward.
Well, it also means anyone who doesn't have one then just doesn't feel like they can play their class compared to anyone who does have one. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll just never compete with, two hunters in totally identical gear, except for that, would never be able to compete. So, Neltharax, today is the day for the big Neltharax bug fix / effective nerf, which means some pretty big numbers adjustments for Beast Mastery and Marks for sure.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see how it feels and how it all turns out as to whether or not this gets balanced out. It's I don't know. I guess we'll find out tonight once we get in and see how it looks. But that is live as of servers coming up.
Yeah. But yeah, monks, paladins, priests, shamans, warlocks, across the board, all large changes to their classes, and I would just say this is probably the biggest class tuning we've ever seen in a not major patch. This is a .0.7 patch, and we're seeing reworks of where talents are on talent trees, and reworks of what abilities do, and massive changing to tuning numbers. Great signs that the team is paying a lot of attention to this and getting these changes in quickly. This means that all those players out there who are getting these changes to their classes can actually play around and learn them, and learn what their rotation is going to feel like, and how the abilities feel, and how this might shift the way that they play their character, or if they want to continue playing that spec on their character, maybe change something up. before new raid content comes out. So you're not learning all this at the same time as new raid content that you're trying to learn. With a new season kicking off, a new dungeon pool, and all that kind of jazz that they're throwing in there. So like I really appreciate that the team is going, hey, we're going to do this. It's going to happen a couple of months before we actually see the .1 patch, so people can get familiar with it. They can get used to it. They can actually check out the notes and really give us feedback on it. If we need to tweak more, we have another patch coming in a couple of months that we can actually do more tweaks with if we need to, based off feedback. So I am thrilled to see this in a .0.7 patch. This level of changes as opposed to just little minor tweaks. So good for them. Very, very pleased. But yes, check out your class changes.
I mean, Retribution Paladin is essentially a new spec as of today. It's been basically rebuilt from the ground up in terms of its talent structure and sort of its rotation. Paladin, as a result, like the class, I guess is like a side effect of Ret needing this kind of rebuild. Paladin is seeing many changes to the class tree, and that is bleeding over into the other two specs as well, because as all the stuff shifts around, then other things need to change to be, for the overall class to make sense in the wake of the huge changes to Ret. I just want to mention a couple things that they say about the Ret rework. There's stuff they wanted to hit. Buttons. They felt like Ret had too many buttons. And I feel like a lot of classes or specs have too many buttons right now, just as a result of the talent rework. But that was an area they wanted to hit with this Ret rework. They also said, there are stacking modifiers. There are many talents that provided small stacking bonuses, which made for a confusing and unpredictable play style. It's that old thing of like all of the damage was in these burst windows, and then everything outside of those just felt bad. So just trying to put, some more of the damage, spread it out across the core abilities, the rotational abilities, and, make the burst windows still exist, but be less, less critical overall in the damage profile. Survivability is another thing they highlighted. And I've noticed this. We play with a Ret Paladin who just he seems like he's dead all the time, and we don't know why. But as they mentioned, Retribution Paladins have had one of the highest death rates across various forms of content. For a plate-wearing class with hybrid healing, this hasn't felt right. So, that's one of the things they wanted to do was, get some passive bonuses and, improve some of their abilities to up their survivability, which is great. I feel like that is necessary. And also maneuverability. We're seeing some changes to Divine Steed and also some changes to the range on their abilities. Like they're getting a bit of an extension, like a 3-yard extension on a bunch of abilities, and Divine Steed's coming off the GCD. It's being extended by a second baseline. So those are some pretty good changes just to help Rets reposition in the heat of battle and still be able to maintain uptime without stepping on Warrior or, something like that, which I know, they were testing out like a leap ability for Paladins, and they took that out pretty quickly, and people were upset about that. But I feel like leap is such an iconic Warrior ability. As a Warrior main, it's just like you can't give that to another class. And yes, Paladin needs maybe a little bit of help in this regard to, line up with other melee classes, but just copying the stuff that makes another spec unique, I don't think was the answer. So, you think about it, Paladins they're magical attackers in many ways, right? Like they wield the Holy Light as like a weapon. So being able to hit something with your damaging abilities that's farther away than you can reach with your sword or your hammer, like it makes sense thematically. So, those were the areas that they identified that they wanted to really address with the big Ret rework. And I don't know. I mean, I remember back in, Legion, when there was those kind of issues with the launch state of Warlock, and they had a lot of communication about how they didn't want to change up dramatically the way the spec played midstream. Like they only like to do that around expansion launches or maybe in a numbered patch if it's an emergency. And I mean, that was a long time ago now, but obviously the philosophy has changed a lot. So I don't know. I don't know anybody who has any interest in Paladin that isn't excited about this. I think Rhett was probably in need of this, and it's cool they were able to get it done so early on in the process for Dragonflight, because you have the spec that's moldy. It's not feeling the way that people want it to feel. And in previous years, if you were in that state in a .0 patch, you were in for a rough time, right? Like that, it might be kind of a rough entire expansion for you at that point, but that's not necessarily what it means anymore. So I'm excited to see what people think about the Rhett changes that are coming in with this patch, and I hope that people have fun with it and enjoy it, and that it's really rewarding to play. And I hope it's maybe like a roadmap going forward for like how the dev team can address a spec that is just not where it needs to be, either in terms of performance or really fun. I mean, I think when you look at these, it's really fun that you're talking about, right? Like you're talking about how many buttons you have to manage in order to play well, how you are building into these like modifiers to like build up this burst window, and that's like the whole thing that your spec is doing. Like that to me, that it's preferential to a degree, but that's just like less fun than doing more overall damage at most points in the fight. Survivability is a huge one, I think, because you just die and you have no control over it. You had no way to counterplay against it. Well, that's about the least fun thing you could possibly imagine.
Right.
And maneuverability, like being able to move your character around, is one of the most crucial and fun elements of any video game that you play, that where your character moves around. Not just in WoW, but like going back to like Super Mario Brothers, right? Like I think finding ways to make that feel good is crucial for a game like WoW.
I would go beyond that as far as highlighting movement. It's in a game like World of Warcraft in particular, adding 1 second onto a movement speed ability can be for a melee class in particular, can be a very big differentiator for both survivability and damage. Because it's how frequently you can get from your catch back up to things you can actually swing at and attack. So being able to actually get there faster is always something that will increase your damage overall, and being able to get out of something and get out of it quickly is also something that is very important. And so if you had a movement speed ability that's 3 seconds and you're in melee range of a boss and it puts out a giant circle you have to get out of, and that circle takes you 4 seconds to get out of, you essentially get 3 seconds of speed, and then you have to run the last second of distance, and the ability goes off after 5 seconds. It can be really tight for you to get out of that. And often what we'd end up seeing is melee having to preemptively move. So get off of the boss before the ability's cast to make sure they can get out in time for the big explosion thing that's going to happen. Whereas in this case, it's like, no, we actually now have the movement speed ability that has that extra second, which will get us out in time. So we can wait until we see the boss start casting it and get out, which then increases their damage, their uptime on the boss, and it increases their survivability because they can get out of the thing. So their window for making an error is then smaller, which I think is also big. So it's a remarkable thing when you increase the range of attack on abilities at the same time as you increase a movement speed ability, how much that alone can affect a class and how much fun it is to play, and how much the survivability and damage of that class is going to go up. So I'm excited to see what the new Rat looks like and what people are thinking about it for sure. Okay. Dragon riding is getting some new talents, some new traits that you can actually pick up. It's also getting 16 new customization scripts, as well as manuscripts, as well as 6 new races that you can actually put your dragon riding to the test on. So lots of things there. You can now refund traits by using a right click, which is pretty big, and traits no longer require a confirmation to unlock. So much easier UI interface to actually deal with. It's just overall a nice big change to dragon riding. So be sure you're picking up the new stuff and you're enjoying being able to swap around your talents that much easier.
Yeah, and you get aerial halt is like the big new trait that you learn, which it lets you kind of somewhat hover a little bit. Like it kind of it slows you down. So if you need to make like a precise landing on something, it makes it a lot easier to do that, which is nice. I think that's the main frustration I've had with dragon riding is like the momentum that you have when you're landing, and like your dragon can't quite figure out if you're on the ground or not, and it wants to just keep gliding or flying around. Dragon riding overall I think is a huge win, but that has been a bit frustrating. So aerial halt is the thing that's going to reduce your forward movement and slow you down so that you can make the landing that you want. And then airborne recovery is the modifier that you unlock that it replenishes your vigor while if you activate aerial halt while you have the Thrill of the Skies buff going. So that's pretty nice. It doesn't punish you as much for using aerial halt that way, because you can, once you land and do what you need to do, you can get going again pretty quick. So that's awesome. I mean, it's a lot of new customizations coming in too for a patch like this. Like, it's dragon riding is another one of those things where we said, after announcement and an alpha, like, well, this is it's a thing that they could add a lot of collection style stuff to. So we'll see what they end up doing. And here's a bunch more stuff to collect. That's cool. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been much of a collector when it comes to the manuscripts and stuff, and I kind of set up my dragon the way I like it, and I just have kind of left it that way. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's cool that they've been adding stuff consistently to the system, and there's more coming in 10.1. Like this is not a thing that they're just kind of they shipped and they're just done with on the next thing. And I think it's awesome. Like it feels like a real intrinsic part of the game and of your character.
Yeah. Elemental storms are getting changed up a little bit. There's now only going to be one elemental storm happening since the primalists are shifting their focus over Forbidden Reach, concentrating their attacks on Dragon Isle. So there's going to be the one storm, and Dragonbane Keep will no longer be an elemental storm. There's going to be additional primalists as they've been recruited from around Azeroth and reinforcing in the elemental storms. This includes increasing the power granted to the primalist allies, making these areas a bit more dangerous, so expect those areas to be more spicy. The storm bosses have had their respawn timers shortened and will not scale up with their health as fast when people engage them. So they're going to be easier to kill and around more often. Always love to hear those two things in combination. These areas will reward more elemental overflow and have a chance for some new bind on account gear tokens to the Forbidden Reach. So hey, good way to catch up your alts, most likely is what you're looking at there. And the tooltips for elemental storms have also been updated to give more information, including potential weekly drops that can be gained in the areas. So a little bit more snazzy loot that can be happening around there too.
Yeah, this seems pretty good to me. I'm glad that they're taking Dragonbane Keep out of the rotation, because it was just an obnoxious place to have the elemental storm. The mobs there are just too beefy, and like it was okay when everybody was doing Obsidian Citadel a lot early on, but as that has fallen off, it's like, well, this is not an efficient or fun way to get farming done on an alt. Like I can't take my Brewmaster out here and do this and have fun with it to get like my next piece of gear I'm trying to grind out. So I'm glad to change that. I think it makes sense to sort of de-emphasize this because you do have Forbidden Reach coming in, and so you have a bunch more outdoor stuff that people can do and you want to kind of funnel them into or focus on. But it seems like the existing elemental storms in the 10.0 zones will just be a bit faster paced. Stuff should die more. You should see bosses more, and they should die faster. You'll get more overflow from doing them. All good things. This has been the main thing for me with not really doing anything with my alt that I did level already, which is that I don't want to like full pug even low keys. Like I have no interest in doing that, and it's not a thing that I'm not like willing to do that. LFR, I have not really done. I've done a little bit in this expansion, but not very much, and I prefer to just stay out of that mode. So the best option for my alts is outdoor stuff. Like Zereth Mortis was very good for that, right? Because you could end up grinding out your 4 set and all this other stuff. So I did that a lot in 9.2, and Elemental Storms are sort of the replacement for that, or the analog to that in this content, but they're very grindy and they don't feel as overall lucrative. I think these changes will help a lot in addition to Forbidden Reach opening up, and the fact that we're getting bind an account gear tokens at item level 385 that are upgradable to item level 395 this early on is amazing. Like normally those catch-up tokens, we kind of only see them in a numbered patch, or we see them in the final patch of an expansion or something. But in this case, it's like it's going to be a great way to get alts caught up to be able to, get ready for season 2, get into 10.1 content, etc. Get another couple characters through raid stuff or whatever you want to do as season 1 is still around. I assume that the gear from the Elemental Storms, I don't know. I wonder if it's Catalyst compatible. I'm not sure. If it is, that'd be incredible, because then you could make sure that you could get your 4-piece on anybody you wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even if not, just being able to get item level up to that point, if you're just doing outdoor content, that'll get you set up to get into normal raid or whatever. So, it sounds like good changes to Elemental Storms. Just de-emphasize them and speed them up, because we have other alternatives with Forbidden Reach coming in. So streamline this a little bit. I think that's a good call.
Yeah. They're also adding a new item level upgrade NPC into the Sapphire Enclave in Valdrakken. So if you're looking for a place to stop by in Valdrakken to actually upgrade items, you can do that in Sapphire Enclave. The rewards, as far as reward shifts that are happening, vendors have found a use for the Dragonflight enchanting materials and are now interested in purchasing them. So Chromatic Dust, Vibrant Shards, and Resonating Crystals can now all be sold to vendors if that's something you want to do. Which, man, it's been a little while since I remember actually vendoring enchanting mats and whatnot. I think that's a strange... Anyways, cool, good. I'm glad that they're giving people an out. I guess it was a way to remove them from the actual auction house from just being piled in there at practically free. If people are doing that, they can actually gain some gold off selling the stuff off. Some of these prices are nice. Like Resonating Crystals going for 20 gold a pop, Vibrating Shards for 7 gold, 50 silver, and Chromatic Dust for 1 gold, 50 silver. That's a lot of gold potentially for just disenchanting stuff on a regular basis, which is nice for players.
Yeah, it's not an insignificant gold cost at all. So, yeah, it kind of sets a floor, right? And for auction house or whatever. And it's weird, like in Shadowlands, everybody just had way too many enchanting mats, and there's just nothing to do with them beyond a certain point. I feel like you have this kind of seasonal curve where you need a lot of enchanting mats, and it's especially worse at the outset of an expansion. Then it tapers off, and it's like, well, if nobody's getting new gear, then nobody needs anything enchanted, right? So it starts to fall off, but you're still like accumulating all these mats, and then normally the mats don't get like super flipped from patch to patch where, I need all the new mats to do the new enchants anyway. So having a vendor cost on it for somebody who plays a lot and ends up collecting like a ton of gear just from doing activities that they don't actually need. Your enchanting mats start stacking up, so it's a nice option.
Yeah. Well, as we get later in the season, people start to look for more things to do. You'll be happy to hear that the Balance of Power quest line from way back in the Legion days is now going to count wide. The actual artifact appearance unlocks are now going to count wide. So after unlocking the base appearance, the criteria for an additional color variant, such as Glory of the Legion Hero and Unleashed Monstrosities achievements, may be completed on any character to earn the appearances. For example, completing the requirements for a certain color variant on your Hunter will now also unlock your Priests for that same account. This is massive because I have all of them unlocked. So now they have all of them unlocked on every character. This is crazy.
Yeah, this is like the best change, I think.
Yeah.
Like the Balance of Power appearances were so cool generally, like across the board. They had so many good ones. And just being able to have access to all this stuff based on what any tune on your account has done. You can go back and do Balance of Power stuff.
Yep.
You have been able to do it. It's not like it was limited to that point in time in Legion, but like it was a lot. It was very time consuming to get all the way through the unlock even, let alone the color variants. So I mean, this is a huge win. You know, I've had thoughts over the, you know, intervening 5-6 years here where it's like, well, I sure would like to get the Neon Bear unlocked. Maybe I should work on balance of power on my druid. But then, you know, you start thinking about what you actually have to do to do it. And it's like, I would rather do something else ultimately. So now I should be able to just use those appearances once servers are up. And that, I mean, it's awesome. Just a huge win. There's so many cool cosmetics behind balance of power. And I guess like if you missed out on Legion or you never did this or whatever at the time, like this is huge motivation to go back and at least do the base unlock, because that's what you get. We had 12 classes. We had 36 specs in Legion. So yeah, you unlock 36 appearances across your account just from finishing
the first one
time.
Like, man, you actually you go, hey, you know what? I kind of want to do this other achievement that unlocks another appearance, and suddenly that goes across all 36 again. It's huge. It's a big change. So very happy to see this across the board. Like, this is something that I'll be using on all of my characters, I'm sure.
I wish it hadn't taken this long to get here, but it was one of those things that I didn't think they would ever do. You know, it's just been off the radar for so long. But yeah, it's just an amazing change.
Yeah. As far as PvP goes, end of season PvP rewards will no longer be tied to a specific faction. Additionally, the end of season title will no longer require a specific number of games played on your faction, but instead will be that number of games played within the season. So, for example, a Crimson Gladiator is a player that will require 150 games played in Dragonflight Season 1, ending at the 0.1% of the ladder to earn the title. So, yeah, it used to be that you actually had to play a certain amount of games on a particular faction to be able to earn the title. I think this is their way of getting around, hey, if people want to faction swap towards an end of a season, that creates big issues for a lot of players. I think this will then resolve some of that as well, which is good. Rated Solo Shuffle. The duration of Solo Shuffle's no-show leaver penalty can now be increased if any character on your account leaves the game. So FYI, this is now a, hey, you know what, you can't just screw around on one character and oops, that one is now got a leaver penalty, so now you're going to go play on a different character and there's no penalty. It now extends it on whatever character on your account you're playing, so keep that in mind. Players can now queue for Solo Shuffle while queued for other rated PvP modes, participating in the Group Finder. This is another huge piece of feedback because basically players are like, hey, I want to queue up for Solo Shuffle, but I want to use it as like a filler content for while I'm waiting around for this much longer queue that I'm doing, or vice versa. So allowing players to actually do that makes a lot of sense. It lets players actually basically get in more actual game time and less sitting around time, which I think is great to see. Okay, as far as classes go, there were a lot of class tuning that came in. We talked about the CC changes that they've been looking at. We talked about some of the health changes they've been looking at to change the pacing of PvP in general to sort of speed the whole thing up. So expect to see some class changes revolving around that. I will say that Tranquility Healing is now increased by 100% while in arena combat with 5 or less players is nice to see, because Tranquility is a sit and channel spell, which is not, you can't move, so it's not like it's particularly hard to interrupt or mess around with. So it's nice that for the first 1 or 2 ticks you might actually get out of Tranquility, it actually does something. That's nice. I appreciate that. I still don't know if it's very mana efficient, but who knows? We'll see what people choose to do with it. Profession.
Yeah, it seems like that was a thing that they did with a bunch of the big healer CDs.
Yeah, was
just up the healing, basically doubled the healing with 5 or less allied players. So yeah, that's probably, I don't know. That seems like an interesting approach. I don't really. I mean, I don't do arena combat, so I don't. I guess what I don't understand about this is how are you doing arena combat with 6 or more allied players? I guess if you do packed house, is it the only situation where this change doesn't apply? I don't know. Also, a lot of tuning changes for Ret in PvP, which who knows where that's all going to land. But you know, as you might expect, this is the Ret patch, so there's a lot of changes coming in for that spec, and that's gonna have impacts on tuning all across the game. So.
Yeah. The profession panel obviously can now be resized. It was something that we talked about previously. A bunch of the profession stuff we talked about before. The currently selected recipe will now stay selected when switching to and from the specialization tab. Added new profession specialization summary screen, which can be viewed for any unlocked profession specialization. And they also sort of work their way through some crafting order stuff here. So public orders no longer require the customer to provide a non-soulbound reagent, which is actually kind of a curious thing to me. Are they specifying that customers can now provide soulbound reagents? Is that what we're looking at here?
Well, they have to provide the soulbound reagents, right? Or at least for now. But I guess this is good, except I don't know how much I really want to do a public order for somebody that doesn't give me the reagents.
Yeah.
Unless their tip is massive and like I don't even have to think about what I'm buying to fill their order, which I don't know. I do maybe like 1 or 2 public orders a week if I'm lucky on my server, but I haven't made a lot of gold off of doing public orders generally anyway. So I don't know. To me, this seems, I get like the change makes sense, I guess, because like literally the items are not soulbound, right? So anybody should be able to acquire them and contribute them to the craft. Yeah. But as a crafter, this just seems like something I don't want to have to deal with. If I see a public order, I want to click 3 buttons and get my gold, So we'll see how that feels. I mean, again, I play on a pretty dead server, pretty small economy. So I don't know how much this really comes into play, but I would say if you're leaving a public order and you are not providing the non-soulbound reagents, you better tip well, please.
Yeah.
Because you're basically asking your crafter to buy the other materials for you.
Yeah, exactly. It would actually almost be interesting to have a baseline cost, which is the vendor cost for the reagents that you're asking them to do that is associated with a tip. Like it's when you're posting the order, it's like, well, if they vendored all this stuff to a in town, they would make 40 gold off of what you're asking them to do. So the tip starts at 40 gold and you then add to the tip from there. Would have been a neat system to sort of put in place for some of this stuff. All right. So due to the layout changes, optional reagents labels have been moved into a tooltip and optional reagents provided by the customer no longer have a check mark next to them. The layout for reagents has been sort of rearranged, and probably one of my favorite changes here, which makes it seem very much like a shopkeep kind of thing. A button has been added next to the customer or crafter's name to whisper or ignore them. In other words, you could choose to like ban list someone from your store, like just completely remove them from your store if you want by just ignoring them if you've had bad experiences in the past. So definitely tip your crafters well, because they may put you on a list where you can't actually get crafting from them anymore.
Yeah, it's a nice little addition.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? I mean, I haven't had any weird negative interactions with people over crafting orders, but I can certainly imagine that happening. So being able to just, ignore somebody, that sounds like a good thing to have as an option. You might need that option, so it's there now if you need it. Yeah.
The search for customers now shows the range of possible item levels for each item, which is also really nice. And they added a text log output when filling crafting orders, so you can actually keep track of what you've been doing in that text log output, which is also quite nice to see as well. They did some changes to engineering. Basically, they did the Zap Throttle Soul Inhaler has had some quality of life improvements. The device can now be used while moving. The channel time of the device has been reduced to 4 seconds from 12. So it's now a third of the time to channel as it was before. Channeling the device for its full duration now marks the target elemental for 30 seconds. Slaying it during this window will also grant its soul. And the cooldown for a successful soul capture has been reduced to 5 minutes from 15. So yeah, I mean, if you're enjoying the soul inhaler, you can inhale way more souls now, way more quickly.
Yeah, like you need this for, various stuff. You need it for making certain items for blacksmithing to make, ingots. I forget exactly what the thing is called that you need it for. But it was a pain. It was a pain to channel for 12 seconds, and then you have to hope the thing dies while you're channeling it. Like, that wasn't really fun. And the 15-minute wait wasn't super fun either, but it was actually not as bad as what you had to do to capture it. I would just have to DPS something down pretty low. I get, I have 2 different bleeds. So, okay, I got bleeds on it. All right, it's going to die in the next couple ticks. Let me start channeling. Okay. Now you don't really have to do that. And that sounds great. like just much better quality of life if you need to collect the elemental souls for your mats and stuff. So yeah, huge win here, because man, that initial implementation was pretty frustrating for like no real good reason.
As far as user interface goes, the Revival Catalyst now displays how many charges you have stored, so it's easier to keep track of that. They did a bunch of upresing of cursors, so if you had some like buy, cast, cogwheel, loot all, lock, mail, and trainer, all those different cursors, when you mouse over them, have now been upresed. So if you made your cursor bigger, it will now look prettier, which is nice. I know Jason in particular benefits from this. They added a tag in the chat typing bar to tell players what language they are typing in, if it's not Common or Orcish. So you can actually tell if you accidentally are typing something in Elvish the entire time, or Donracian, sorry, and they can't tell what you didn't recognize that you were typing in that, and no one can understand what you're saying. The chat command button now has arrows for menu items that have flyouts, and they fixed an issue with inaccurately displaying rogue combo points and arcane mage charges. So if you were seeing the wrong amount of combo points or charges, they've now resolved that as well. So a bunch of things in here UI-wise, which are nice. There was a more in-depth blog post about some of the class changes that were coming in 10.0.7. I'll include that in the notes as well, so you can check that out. That just has some particular tuning laid in around some of Priest and Shaman and Warlock changes that came in just for damage abilities, things like that. It's probably all encompassed inside the actual official patch notes that come out, but
it will be. Well. At press time, they didn't roll the other changes into the actual patch note post. Like, there were like hotfix changes on top of all of the patch notes for the class changes as well. Yeah. But yeah, some nice buffs coming in on top of some of the other stuff that was laid out in the initial patch note document.
Yep. And then the other thing we wanted to highlight on the show is the Twitch drops are back. You can earn the Disco toy now through Twitch drops. It's going to be happening March 21st. So as of today at 10 a.m. So I guess it kicked off about an hour and a half ago, and is going to be running until April 2nd at midnight Pacific time. So if you're someone who wants to get on Twitch, watch your favorite Twitch streamer, obviously you have to link your account, link your Twitch account to your BNet account and whatnot to get the rewards. But yeah, that's kicking off today and runs until the 2nd of April. So be sure you are taking advantage in the next week and a bit of getting yourself the Disco toy from Twitch drops.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They've been doing drops campaigns pretty consistently around any kind of patch or other content launches in WoW, and it's been awesome. Like, it was the first time we'd ever seen it back in November, right? Yeah, after all these years of WoW being a thing on Twitch, and they seem pretty committed to continuing to roll stuff out. If you had the Disco toy from the trading card game and you bought the card from eBay or something and paid some kind of exorbitant price, then I'm sorry that everybody can just have one for watching Twitch now. But I guess at some point they will run out of stuff to recycle in for these rewards. But we're also seeing with the trading posts and stuff, they must have a pipeline for these types of cosmetics as well. So I don't know, maybe we'll start seeing new stuff come through here too. I do hope they just keep doing drops for every patch launch or raid release or whatever. It's super cool. It's good for people streaming WoW on Twitch, and it's awesome for people who play WoW and just want cool stuff. So yeah, glad to see it's coming back again this week.
Yeah. I'm going to mention a few things about 10.1 PTR because there are things I want to highlight. The Embers of Neltharion campaign is now available for testing. The world bosses, there's 2 world bosses that are up that are now available for testing. They did raid testing this past Thursday on the 16th. So there were people in there actually playing around, testing out the new bosses. So they're actually already working on that raid testing stuff, which sort of lends some more credibility towards what Jason was saying earlier of, hey, you know what, maybe early May is when we're looking at for 10.1 dropping. It would make sense with where the PTR is at, and we get the new raid, new season kicking off. So be expecting that in the next couple of months for that to all kick off. There's 4 new dungeons from past expansions that are going to be entering into the Mythic Plus rotation. Those are obviously kicking off on PTR as well. So you have Freehold, Underrot, Neltharion's Lair, and Vortex Pinnacle. that have all been added in that you're going to be able to check out the PTR versions of for Mythic Plus. So people can start practicing their routes and getting all their strategies laid out for that. So that's pretty exciting for a lot of players. As far as user interface and accessibility goes, a ping animation has been added to the map when open from the quest tracker, making it easier to spot quest locations. This is 10.1 stuff, just reinforcing that so you're not looking for it right away today. We're still a couple months out from this hitting. The pet frame can now be moved separately from the player frame, which is another nice change for them kicking off there in edit mode. The menu has been reorganized with several options now hidden under the advanced options. So be sure you're actually clicking on advanced options if you're like, hey, they took away this thing that I really like to change on my UI on a regular basis. So be sure you're checking that out. The visibility toggle of the debuff and buff bar frames have been combined into one checkbox to make their functionality remaining the same. And the encounter bar will stay visible if it's already shown when entering edit mode. So yeah, it's nice to see them sort of doing more UI tweaks and interface changes. I want to keep seeing these in every patch, which we have been so far. So looking forward to where the UI looks at the end of this expansion, if they continue along these lines, because we'll be getting lots and lots and lots of changes kicking off into that. Anything in here you want to highlight, Jason?
No, I mean, I think, you definitely make a good point there. It's obviously edit mode and the UI upgrade is an ongoing priority for the team, which is awesome. If you're messing around with PTR, I haven't been, but the campaign stuff's up, world bosses and all that. So if you want to check those out, they're there. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's any testing this week. I don't have that handy. I know they were doing some testing last week in terms of end game stuff like raiding and Mythic Plus. There's some class changes up. It's kind of funny, but there's like less disruptive class changes in the .1 patch than in the .0.7 patch that's going up today. But we'll keep an eye on that stuff. I'm sure that'll change a lot as we kind of move through this PTR cycle. But yeah, I mean, I think when you look at a patch, there's a lot of new endgame content like that. Some of that stuff is sort of, I don't know. That's the stuff that we're going to focus on, right? Is like, how's the raid shaping up? How are the keystones shaping up? What's the gearing system look like? Like, what gear is going to be good? How are the trinkets? That's the kind of stuff that we tend to focus on the most, I think. So
yeah,
we'll certainly be seeing a lot more of that in the next few weeks here. I don't think I'm going to be able to play this PTR. It always seems like a good idea, but I just never in practice actually have time or motivation to do it. And especially with a new patch coming out this week, there's going to be stuff in the live game I want to do. But yeah, I mean, 10.1 is, PTR is out there and development's rolling. Last week we got a pretty small build. It's just added the world bosses, I think, and there wasn't anything else new in there. But I'd imagine that with 10.0.7 getting out the door, we're going to see a lot of momentum on 10.1 PTR soon.
Yeah. Okay, so there was a post that went out specifically about frequently asked questions for the new upgrade system that's coming in. Obviously replacing Valor and everything else as far as that goes. And so we want to highlight a couple of questions from that I think were actually pretty good questions. The first one here is, this seems awfully complicated, the system in general. Why can't we just give us more Valor, right? Why can't you just keep the current system and just say, hey, here's more Valor to spend things on? So the answer to that is, one of the philosophical underpinnings of this system is that we want to encourage players to challenge themselves when they want to improve their character's power. Farming low-level keys is not challenging for most players who routinely time keys in the teens or higher. There are a lot of moving pieces to the system because it's been engineered to handle all kinds of situations in an effort to more closely align doing the optimal thing with doing the fun thing, while still keeping the base player's experience simple. And some of the complications are there specifically to minimize the losses for making mistakes. We don't want people punished for upgrading the wrong thing, if you will. You kill stuff, you get flint. I just keep calling them Flintstones. They're Flintstones to me, right? You get flight stones, kill hard stuff, get crests to take flight stones and crests to the item vendor. The item upgrade vendor tells you how much it'll cost, and upgrade the gear as long as you can afford it. if you didn't read the big post from all last week, but you took an item to an upgrade vendor and read the tooltip for crests and flightstones, you'd get enough of the idea to use the system just fine. So I get that there's a lot of moving pieces, and so sometimes you just need to try something totally different rather than trying to tweak the current system, because you don't know how tweaking the current system a little bit in one area just breaks things in others. So sometimes introducing something new and just shelving the old system is a better way to go about it, to let players sort of experience something and see how all that goes. So I appreciated that Q&A answer.
Yeah, I think also, Chimes makes a good point here that in practice, I think this stuff is going to be more intuitive to a player than looking at a table of the 4 different, or is it 5 different, like tracks that the items can be on and how the upgrades overlap and all that. Like, that's stuff that somebody needs to know so that these things function. But your everyday player doesn't need to necessarily understand that intimately. Like, all you know is you have an item and you have an item you want to upgrade, and then the NPC will tell you what you need in order to perform the upgrade. So I think that's okay. I do think, like the issue of just expanding the Valor system versus doing it this way, I think it does make more sense because, the doing the optimal thing piece, like just potentially influencing people to just spam like mythic +2s or whatever in order to grind the currency. It creates like a behavior that the player doesn't want to do. It doesn't benefit other people who maybe are just like at the low end of the Keystone system and just trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. It's a lose-lose, even though, you come out with the currency at the end of the process. Like, it makes sense, right? From a game designer perspective, like somebody who's laying out the goalposts for you, to me, it makes sense to have this kind of tiered system versus, just grind Valor. Even if you put Valor in from other sources, so like you didn't have to do Keystones to do it, still, it'd be kind of the same effect versus, which is sort of what Flightstones are in a way, right? If you think about it, I guess, because they come from all manner of sources. So there's some overlap, but I do I appreciate the idea that the point is to funnel you into and have you focus on content that is challenging and interactive and fun for you. And that's what's going to be ultimately the most rewarding. Like, just from a design perspective, that seems to make sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. Next question was, does the system and its hard caps mean that I have to acquire the same item for every single track? So I need to farm my best in slot veteran, and then again for champion, and then again for hero. Is this what the system's going to be, right? People basically thinking about season 1 to season 2 to season 3, meaning you have to get the same, cube or whatever it is every season, as far as trinkets go, and upgrade it every single season. Well, what they're getting at here is, while that's certainly an option, it's not required. Getting an item on veteran track means that you can upgrade that item to veteran 8 of 8, which is the same item level as champion 4 of 8, which is only 4 item levels lower than hero 1 of 5. If you upgrade your veteran to 8 of 8, you'll be more ready to do content that drops the hero track. That said, this is a known concern, and we're looking at the options. I can't promise any specific results because there are a lot of moving parts going on here, but this is under active investigation. We won't be making any changes to address this concern in the very early weeks of the patch, but if it turns out that the data, when it comes to bear out of this concern, is a concern, then they'll step in, and obviously that's all revolves around player feedback. The important thing here is the item level difference between having something that's your lowest level, that's 8 of 8, and something that's 2 tiers higher at rank 1 is negligible. It's 4 item levels. So the tracks are long enough, if you will, of how far you can upgrade an item that you're not going to notice a ginormous leap in power when that sort of stuff comes about, which I think is good to see and sort of good for them to clarify. It does mean that currently, though, you do acquire higher item level ones that you then start the track over again on if you want, as you sort of do different difficulties of content. But you know that they're looking at it, and so if it's something that doesn't feel good and you want it to change, then obviously once you're experiencing it, you can start leaving feedback and seeing how all that goes, which is good.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things about the system as we currently know it it's just kind of bad. It's just slightly worse than what we have now, because if you get a low item level version of an item, a trinket or what have you, through a dungeon drop, you can upgrade it all the way up to 13 out of 13 with Valor. It's going to take you a lot of Valor potentially, but you can do it.
Yeah.
It sounds like the initial plan is that you're not going to be able to do that in this season 2 system, although there are some concessions here, right? They're not saying like they are definitely going to ship this way and this is the way it's going to be forever. I feel like requiring reacquisition in order to move up is just not. I think there's something fundamentally bad about that, especially in a world where you need the difficulty specific crests in order to upgrade an item anyway. I feel like that serves kind of the purpose of restricting the item level upgrade to the level of content that you're doing without necessitating the reacquisition. But we'll see how it ends up, shaping up, what they end up going with. I think like for somebody in my position and the kind of stuff I usually do, I don't know, like how much time am I going to spend doing keystone dungeons that are below level 16 in season 2? Maybe the first like 2 weeks tops, if that much even. We might just be doing 16s and stuff the first week. So I don't think this is really going to be an issue for the way I play, because even in like the most frustrating depths of Shadowlands season 3, trying to get that blood spattered scale out of the other side, one more time, the 4th time I was trying to reacquire that same item, I never went to the level of I'm just going to spam Dungeon Finder for +2s and I'm just going to chain run +2s and then I'll worry about the Valor upgrades later. I never did that. That's just not, I don't have time for that. I don't have energy for that. Like I will do my 16s. And so, for me, this really changes nothing about my approach to the game or anything, but I do feel like fundamentally it's just bad if you have an item that you acquired from, end-game content. It has an upgrade track, but you have like a hard cap on it that is much lower than the content that you're actively participating in. I feel like it would be an improvement to, allow some way to bump it up into the max upgrade track with the appropriate crests and the Flightstone currency and everything. So we'll see where it goes. But that's where they're at with it right now. So it's good to know. At least it won't, if it ends up sticking and it goes out that way and when we play with it that way, at least it's something that, I'm not going to spend, not that I myself would do it anyway, but like I'm not going to spend a bunch of time grinding a particular keystone at +2 to get it dropped, only to find out that I can't upgrade it to a relevant item level anyway. So
yeah,
good to know, and I hope they reconsider.
They've put systems in the game before that allow you to exchange an item for an item, so it wouldn't be too hard to be like, hey, once you've hit this item up to whatever it is rank, you can then walk over to this vendor and trade it in to get the next tier up, as long as you have this particular currency, which could be 5 of the next crest or whatever it is, right, to bump an item. That might be what they end up doing. Who knows? So obviously it's player feedback based, and we'll see what they do. But I definitely understand those concerns. But you also make a good point about, hey, if you're participating in heroic content and running, keys in the teens all the time, you're probably not going to notice the system very much because you're just going to get the item level item that fits the content you're already doing. So it wouldn't be something that you'd notice in a big way. But it is overall, I would say, a system that is going to limit people's reach as far as item level goes by encouraging them to have to go and do harder content to get the higher item level base items to be able to do it. So it does push players to actually go and participate in higher level content on a regular basis, which is a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's when you don't have to participate in the higher level content to be able to get an item level item all the way up there, it makes you actually going and exploring that content easier because you already have the gear to do it. in the sense that you already have the gear that's sort of making you able to brute force some things that you normally wouldn't be able to do. So it does limit that aspect of it. All right, Q&A. Back into this. The question, next one comes in here, says, okay, but we don't know exactly where the Hero Track gear comes from. For that matter, we don't know where each level of Shadowflame Crest will come from either. Can you clear that up? So the thing to consider, and this is a reminder, it takes 15 fragments being combined into to make a full crest. The Whelpling Shadowflame Crests are from outdoor content, world quests, random drops, non-elites, and creatures, that sort of thing. You'll also get you'll also be more likely to get Whelpling Crests from keystones that are +5 and above. There's a significant bonus for timing a key. You can get 5 fragments for completing a timed +5, but 12 if you don't complete it in time. So, but not 12 if you. Wait, I got to read this again. Mythic Plus keystones of +5 will drop Shadowflame Crests for Whelplings, the fragments. There's a significant bonus for timing the key. You get 5 fragments for completing it, but 12 if you complete it in time. Okay, that's what it is. So you get 5 for completing it, 12 for in time. Okay, sorry about that confusion. And then, of course, the Raid Finder will also drop the Whelpling Shadowflame Crest, and you'll get 10 from most bosses as far as fragments go, and the end boss will drop 15, and so you can then make a crest immediately for killing the end boss inside LFR, which is great. Similarly, with the Drake's Shadowflame ones, they come from +6 to +10 as far as keystones go, and they come from normal raid content. The Worms ones come from +11s to +15s, and from heroic content, and of course the Aspects ones come from 16 and above for keystones, and then from the Mythic content. And for clarity on all the above, the crests do not have a chance of dropping. They will drop every time, the fragments. The crest acquisition is purely deterministic. In some outdoor situations, there is a quantity variance, but even in those circumstances, they will always show up as long as you're not at acquisition cap. So just as a heads up, you'll always be earning these things. It's not a chance. Just inside some of the outdoor content, it might vary a bit, but in general, you can count on how many fragments you're going to be getting towards making your crests and keeping that in mind. As far as the track of gear goes, the veteran gear track is going to be available in limited quantity from outdoor content, from camps and whatnot. The gear will also drop at the end of run chests for Mythic Plus dungeons on a +8 and above, and Raid Finder gear will also drop these veteran track gear as well. The Champions gear being +9s to 16s. Greater Vault gear on this track, Mythic Plus Keystone Dungeons +7 and above, and then the normal raid for that. And Hero Track is +17 and above for Keystone Dungeons, goodness, from the end of run chest. The Great Vault awards gear around this from the +8s and up to +15s, and then Heroic bosses. And Mythic gear is Great Vault for 16s and above. Okay, there must be something that they typoed in here for the 17 and up for the Hero Track gear, because 16 and up is the Mythic gear one, and Mythic Plus, Mythic bosses from Raid as well. So there must be a typo in here as well.
Well, no, because that's the 17 and up is for end of run.
Oh, end of run chest. You're right. End of run chest. Yeah,
and the 16 and up is from the vault only. Yeah, it seems like
they left a blank. There should be a point that they said you cannot get end of run chest stuff for the Mythic gear.
We need a table. That's what we need is a table.
Give me a table.
An X in the cell.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it sounds like you won't be able to get that like maxed out track of gear from end of run dungeons at all, which is similar to the way it is now, right? Like you're not getting a 421 from end of run.
Exactly.
And anything you're getting from end of run, you're not upgrading to 421. So functionally, there's no real difference in your gearing or your gearing options. It's just, this is a huge refresh to this stuff. And it's a little hard to wrap your brain around, I think, when all you're looking at is a bunch of bullet points and stuff that is not like tangible to us in a gameplay sense. I don't think that once we're into season 2 and we're dealing with this stuff on a daily and weekly basis, that it'll be really that like obscure or like that hard to figure out. But it's really weird to talk about it right now because there are so many layers to this and we have no firsthand experience with it. But
I think it's going to be really straightforward once you get it. I think players are going to be like, oh, I do this content, I get 15 fragments, I combine them into a crest, I take them to this dude, I upgrade an item. The dude tells me exactly how much it's going to cost to upgrade it. Like, that's going to be the level of complexity that exists. It's not going to be that super complicated.
And it'll be pretty obvious, you know, what you need to do once you see the item and you have the tooltips, you have the vendors, and then there's the, you know, it's the same distinction that we've had for a while now, where there's an extra bonus in the vault for high keystone gear, but it doesn't affect end of dungeon. So it's like it's a bit of a different way to do it because it has to exist within this system, but it's in practice it's not really different than what we've known for a while with the really since I guess the beginning of Shadowlands, with the way the vault works and sort of that extra tier of vault rewards versus end of dungeon.
Yeah. There's one last question that really just clarifies if you're limited as to how many times you can get the actual crests themselves or how many times you can use them within a week, and it's the acquisition, so it's on actually getting them. And what they specify there is, like, let's say you've already earned 140 Whelpling crests fragments for the week, and so you're only 10 away from the actual cap, and you kill something that should drop 12, you'll only get 10 because you're 10 away from the cap, so you'll essentially hit that 150, which is 10 crests weekly as far as that cap goes. And obviously that number is subject to change based off PTR stuff and how they see it, but yeah, that's the concept is it's the acquisition of the fragments themselves that they're going to be limiting. So you won't be able to be like, hey, I got up to 145. Now let's do something that gives me 15 fragments because it's the last boss of an LFR or whatever. And so I'm going to go over the cap. You'll only get 5. There's a cap that's on how many you can get in the week. So yeah, it was a good little Q&A, and I'll have the blog post to it. There's a couple other questions there that I just didn't. I feel like we've already spoken to those answers before, so didn't include them in there. But certainly, if you want to read through it, feel free.
It sounds like you can get like 10 crests per week, via fragments, right? So like 150 fragments, I assume per difficulty band.
That's the one question that wasn't asked that I would have asked if I were there. Was, hey, do I have to worry about? Do I have to worry about the content I'm doing at the start of the week? Because if I do normal first, does that mean I can't earn crest towards heroic stuff? Because that would be really bad.
Yeah, it can't be like that, right? That would be so bad. Yeah. I better not do, the world boss or LFR or something before my raid night. I hope it's not like that. I feel like, I don't know, if we need to have a cap on the crests, then, that's 10 crests a week, right? And so that's
eight upgrades. 8 upgrades on each item, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to take potentially multiple crests per upgrade on those items. So they've done the math out on how this is actually going to look. And so it's not until we actually get a really flushed out version of this that we're going to know, right? We're not going to know whether it's to upgrade your entire gear slotted set, your entire set of armor, if that's currently going to take 8 weeks to do because of the caps, and you have to cap every week. We don't know what it's going to look like yet. So we got to wait and see.
And you only have, 17 gear slots? Something like that. Depending on what you hold in your hands, I guess. And early on in a season, you're probably not going to be investing this stuff in items you're probably going to be getting item level upgrades like hand over fist as you start knocking down new content, ascending the keystone ranks, killing new raid bosses. So, the cap is probably less of a concern in terms of what you're using and how many of them you're needing early on, because you may not want to invest crests in that stuff until you start, really zeroing in on your build and getting the items that you want and starting to get, up that item level curve that you're ascending. So, we'll see how that feels in practice. You know what? There was a lot of good info in this post, and I kind of wish it had come out alongside the initial announcement post about how the season 2 item upgrades are going to work.
Yeah.
I still have some questions, and I think there's still some stuff up in the air that I could see maybe changing either before this comes out or shortly thereafter. But, I mean, overall, I think it's a big win for the game in terms of how we gear our characters and what an item even like is or does. It's just because it's just additive on top of all this other stuff that we have and have been doing for so long. Everybody can participate in it regardless of what kind of content they like doing. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a big win. There are some like obvious pain points to me that I kind of hope that they decide to smooth out a little bit. But overall, I think the idea is very interesting, and I think it'll be fun to play around with. So, definitely. So I'm sure it's something we're going to be keeping a close eye on and talking about a lot as we move into 10.1, and then probably for a long time thereafter too.
Yeah, and the biggest thing about systems like this is they're way easier for players to understand when they're actually going through the steps themselves than when someone's trying to describe them in a blog post. It is substantially harder to understand what's happening than when you actually just sit a player down and go, all right, here's what you need to do. Just go out in the world and do world content. Oh, hey, now you've got these fragments. Hey, look, the fragments say they combine at 15. You just right click on it. Hey, look, now you have a crest. Hey, look, crests go to this guy. This guy tells you exactly how many crests he needs to be able to actually upgrade the item that you have. Oh, okay. Huh. What do you know? That's the system. Like, it's not as complex when you actually get down to it on that level. It's when you're thinking about the entire scope of the whole thing in a spreadsheet and, blog post format that people start to go, wow, this is really intimidating. I don't really know what's going on with this. So I would encourage players to, be a little bit forgiving of how complicated this might sound inside blog posts, because it's going to be not so bad once we actually dig into it. All right.
It's going to be awesome for like outdoor players and stuff. Like if you just kind of dabble with end game stuff, but you mostly just, I level up a dude and I get some gear and I do a world boss. I'm going to do some LFR. Maybe I'll do a little bit of normal raid. Maybe I'll do some low keystones. Like, I think this system is going to be awesome for those types of players because it unlocks a lot of potential power for them in a way that they were kind of locked out of before with like the Valor upgrade system and everything for the past couple of years. So definitely, I can see the potential for a big win in that regard, which is great. I mean, I think it's that just helps everybody out, regardless of your play style.
I like that it's another goalpost for players to strive towards. It's something where there's going to be players out there who are like, ooh, if I just do one more normal boss this week, then I'll have enough fragments to get another crest so I can upgrade this item. So like it's another one of those like, ooh, I could actually try. Like you don't necessarily have to get 150 fragments a week. You don't have to cap every week, right? Depending on how you play the game. But there are going to be those times where you're just about there. You just need one more whatever it is, and you can choose to go and do it. And if that might drive you to do that extra boss or drive you to do that extra, keystone or whatever it is, just to finish off your achievement for the week and actually get that nice, I guess, endorphin hit of I upgraded something, right? Like, that exists. So I'm excited for a system that has more goalposts like that for players. All right. Speaking of goalposts for players, our Patreon is live over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. We'd like to thank all of our patrons so much for supporting our show, but I'd like to give a special shout out today to Arajian, Celian, Kapawi, Max, Mibble the Mighty, Nick, Shorel, Viper14, and Zalius. Thank you so much for supporting the show. It means a lot to us for all of our patrons who give to make sure our show stays on the air and keeps putting out new episodes on the weekly. There's no new patrons for this week, but thank you so much for all of the support from players. We appreciate all of you, and stay tuned for our 2023 plans. We're going to be doing something coming up here soon, and we'll do announcement stuff through Discord, and we'll have players be able to check stuff out. Maybe we'll do something for 10.1. You never know.
Yeah, patrons, thank you so much. I mean, the support for the show has been huge over the years. It really helps us out and, helps us keep the show consistent and keep it at a high level. So we couldn't do it without you, to be honest. So thank you for the support. And yeah, we need to do a patron event here for Q1. So we'll get something out there soon. But yeah, thank you everybody. It really does mean a lot.
It does. If you've enjoyed this episode of The Starting Zone, another way to support us is by heading on over to your iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. They really help out our show, and we love reading them here from our listeners. This one comes in from Lord of Spice, entitled Great Show. The structure and personality of this podcast is great. I do believe, however, this podcast is truly about all the things World of Warcraft and the people who play it. Then it should include more PvP. Solo Shuffle has been almost, if not revolutionary, as the introduction as the introduction of Mythic Plus, and its player base is huge. The state of PvP is constantly changing, as is the rest of the game, and deserves to be discussed. Otherwise, the show and its topics being discussed are interesting and well informative. Keep it going. 1 second. Apologies. I had to cough. Thank you so much, Lord of Spice. I agree that we don't obviously talk a lot about PvP on the show. Jason and I, this current expansion, have not done a lot of PvP things. I have done a lot of PvP in the past, and did talk a lot about stuff on previous expansions as far as PvP balance and what's going on with it, and tuning and whatnot. And I agree that if you're someone who's feeling like Solo Shuffle has been as revolutionary to PvP as Mythic Plus has to PvE, then clearly it deserves attention. And we've been covering the posts and whatnot that come out about it. Obviously, with us not participating in it as actively, it's a little bit trickier that way. I think the Solo Shuffle esports is what's going to really draw more eyes onto it. People actually trying to have that, who is the best DPS, who is the best healer role in the world when it comes to Solo Shuffle, since it is a solo experience and it's based off who that player is. I think it'd be really neat to see inside an esport environment, and that's where I think a lot more PvP coverage would come around it. Strategically, as far as like discussing what classes are currently really strong in it, why they're strong in it, things like that, that's probably getting a little bit deeper into it than we would on the show, similarly to how we don't generally talk specifically about how a rotation being used on a particular boss by a particular class is something that people should try and do. I think maybe there's some bonus content that could be created around that. Maybe even some Patreon content that could be created around that. But as far as PvP goes, we'll try to keep people informed as to what's happening with it and the changing state of the game. But we'll do what we can. We hear you.
Yeah, thanks for writing in. Appreciate the comments. It's great to hear from you. So thanks for taking the time. I mean, I would say for myself, like I've never been a PvPer. Like I just don't do it, and I don't really like it. It's not my cup of tea. I haven't even so much as been in like a random battleground in the last several expansions. It's just I can't speak to it with any kind of authority or even coherently in any way. So yeah, outside of blue text, I have nothing to say about PvP. I know like a friend of mine actually does a lot of Solo Shuffle and seems to really enjoy it. And he's not somebody who really is like a huge PvPer, but Solo Shuffle is sort of that mode that lets him have an entry into it, especially without having like a bunch of us who PvP together. So it does seem like a really great addition to the game. Even obviously there's some warts just like with anything, but it's something that's opened up rated PvP to way more people than ever before. So that's a great addition. But a lot of what we talk about on the show reflects our experiences and our viewpoints and stuff. And I am not somebody who can bring anything to the table about WoW PvP. So that has a lot to do with, why PvP doesn't really have a big place in the show. It's just not, the show is reflective of the way we approach the game, and PvP just is not, it's not what I come to WoW for. So that's, we don't usually have anything insightful to say about it, honestly.
Yeah. When I was doing my gladiator grind, back in BFA, and then when I did a little bit of gladiator grind inside Shadowlands, and did a lot of rated battlegrounds inside Shadowlands. We talked about it a fair amount on the show. At least I brought it up as a topic and sort of highlighted it. But yeah, again, if we're not engaging in it on a frequent basis, and Solo Shuffle being a relatively newer thing with this expansion isn't something I'm engaging in, then we just don't have as much firsthand knowledge to be able to share stories and whatnot of what we're discovering about it, other than covering the blog posts and information that we hear from friends who are experiencing it. So, obviously it could be something that can be covered more. And if you're feeling like it's something that's as big as Mythic Plus, I think it probably should have more of a spotlight shone on it. So maybe we'll look at that. Yeah, like I said. All right, that's going to wrap up episode 570 of The Starting Zone. If you'd like to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for The Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask us a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter, or you can join our Discord over at thestartingzone.com/discord. If you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/The Starting Zone. We can check out all the designs on shirts and mugs and stickers and all that kind of fun stuff. And if you're trying to find Jason online, where can you find Jason?
Best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. You can also find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald and sometimes youtube.com/Shieldwald, although definitely no YouTube streams this week because Twitch drops are happening. So assuming I have servers to play on, I will be streaming tonight. I'll be streaming Wednesday, Sunday. That's my usual schedule, Tuesday, Wednesday, Sunday, 7:30 Eastern. So we'll be doing raids and keystones and probably just dinking around doing 10.0.7 stuff. So come check that out and get yourself some progress on your disco toy while you're at it.
Yeah, let's do that. And if you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD and youtube.com/@SpencerHD. Just throw a little subscribe over there. But with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.